Good evening. Welcome to the College of San Mateo. My name is Melissa Marino, and I am the Chancellor of San Mateo County Community College District, and it's my honor to welcome you all to tonight's Town Hall. Our district serves over 30,000 students across 3 campuses: Cañada College, College of San Mateo, and Skyline College. Our students are the future leaders of San Mateo County, and we value civic engagement and reinforce the purpose of government, which is to serve and support our communities, and to engage with the people in town halls like this. As a district, we also rely on our local elected officials to support us, and one of the greatest acts of social justice is Senate Bill 893, Free College, which has removed financial barriers and has increased our student enrollment by over 22%, and thanks also to the support of Congressman Mullin. It is my pleasure to introduce Congressman Kevin Mullin tonight. Kevin is a San Mateo County native and a former small business owner who cares deeply about community service. He previously served on the South San Francisco City Council before being elected to the California State Assembly, where he represented the San Mateo County for 10 years and rose to leadership as Speaker Pro Tem. He was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2022 and is now a sophomore in Congress. With only 1 term under his belt, he was appointed this year to the powerful House Energy and Commerce Committee, which has the broadest jurisdiction of any congressional committee and influences issues that impact all of our lives, including public health, medical research, food and drug safety, environmental quality, energy policy, telecommunications, consumer protections, and more. When not traveling to Washington, D.C. to represent us in Congress, Kevin continues to live in his hometown of South San Francisco, where he's raising twin 7-year-old boys with his wife, Jessica. Please join me in welcoming your Congressman, Kevin Mullin.
What a wonderful intro. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Chancellor Melissa Moreno, for the wonderful, kind words, for hosting us on this beautiful campus that we have. This community college system is a jewel. We are so proud of it. And I appreciate the kind introduction. I am a big fan of the College of San Mateo. In fact, I wear the Bulldogs jersey when I play on the congressional baseball team. The Republicans are all very organized. They've got red, MAGA-colored jerseys. We all represent jerseys from high schools and community colleges and schools in our district. So just a little differentiation there between the parties. But definitely want to thank CSM for hosting us, and a special shout out to the school's theater and multimedia department, which is making this possible tonight. This is just one of multiple town halls I'm hosting this year because it's so important for me to hear from you all, my constituents, about what is on your mind. I know a lot of you are here this evening or watching online because you are deeply concerned about what's happening to our federal government, to our country, and how it impacts us here at home in the 15th Congressional District. I absolutely share those concerns, and I want to thank everyone for participating. Our democracy literally depends on all of us staying engaged. For those in the audience who would like to ask a question or share a comment, we've passed out cards for you to write down your name, the city where you live, and your comment. We have limited time this evening, but we'll do our best to get as many questions and comments in as possible during our Q&A section. We have staff walking up and down the aisles, collecting your cards throughout the event. If you hear your name called and city of residence called by my communications director, Samantha, just raise your hand and one of my staff will meet you in the aisle with a microphone. As Americans are painfully aware, we are in the midst of a full frontal autocratic assault on our democracy and the federal government itself. It started with the president pardoning perpetrators of the January 6th insurrection, including the most violent attackers from that day. He then brought in Elon Musk and Doge to conduct a hostile takeover and slash federal agencies that provide essential support for things that we all rely on, like finding cures for cancer, our public school system, national parks, consumer protections that make sure the food and drugs we all consume are safe, and so much more. He's also been chipping away at our core rights by ignoring due process, trying to change birthright citizenship, and curbing civil rights protections. We are fighting against unprecedented attacks and acts that are intentionally designed to bring chaos and uncertainty to the way our government operates. He's also intentionally attacking California, the world's fourth largest economy, just because he can't let go of his own personal vindictive agenda. He's threatened to stop grants to our universities that support critical research and development of life-saving medicines and treatments for diseases. The Republicans in the House are trying to overturn our state's longstanding ability to address pollution and protect clean air, the so-called EPA waivers that is now over on the Senate side. Donald Trump, has threatened to withhold FEMA support from our Southern California neighbors who lost homes and loved ones due to the wildfires. And most recently, he deployed the National Guard and active duty Marines, I should say, to LA, despite both the mayor and the governor emphasizing local law enforcement was well equipped to handle the situation at hand. Then he threatened to arrest Governor Newsom just for speaking out about it. These actions are straight out of an authoritarian playbook. It is un-American. Now to the big, ugly budget bill that you may have heard about. Republicans are trying to eliminate essential support for health care and food assistance for those who are our most vulnerable population. Why? So they can give tax breaks to the wealthy, which will increase the national debt. Let's talk about the budget for a moment. I think we have a slide here. There are three big, ugly numbers I want to highlight. $2.4 trillion. $2.4 trillion added to the national debt over the next decade, adding to our already untenable $36 trillion debt. That is to be paid off largely by our kids and our grandkids. 16% of the annual budget goes to interest paid on the debt. This is unconscionable and a form of generational theft. 18 million children who will lose assistance for school lunches, who qualify, they will lose that assistance if this budget bill becomes law, with even deeper cuts to SNAP and food assistance programs. 16 million people in this country will lose health care coverage due to cuts to Medicaid, the Affordable Care Act, and Medicare. Also, Republicans can give tax breaks to corporations and billionaires who simply do not need them. So I wanted to highlight something that happened recently. As was mentioned by Dr. Moreno, I serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee. We had a 27-hour marathon markup with only breaks for voting on the floor. But we were there, the Democrats were, fighting these Medicaid cuts, calling out our Republican colleagues, many of whom represent areas where a significant population receives Medicaid. So Republicans chose to hold this hearing. They timed it so they would be heard in prime time, and the Democrats would be heard in the middle of the night when the media had left. So in the dark of night, they were trying to hide their intentions from the American people. During that meeting, I highlighted a constituent story, and I think we have a slide of that. At my last town hall that we held in Belmont, Mark spoke to me about his 42-year-old son, Corey, who has a disabling form of autism, and he relies on Medicaid. Every day, Corey needs help with basic functions like brushing his teeth, bathing, dressing, using the restroom, and cooking. Corey is exactly the type of person who this essential safety net program was designed to help. I was thinking about Mark and Corey during that 27-hour markup, trying to fight those Republican cuts. This is not about government efficiency. I'm afraid this is about cruelty. I had a healthcare episode earlier this spring, and this awful bill is why I flew across the country right from the hospital to vote no. I had to have my vote registered because of what this is going to do potentially to the country. So our House Democratic Caucus is united in opposing these cuts. That budget bill passed by just one vote, 215 to 214. Much of what my Republican colleagues are doing will impact their own constituents. Here's a map that shows how many red and purple districts have high rates of Medicaid enrollment. This slide shows the rate of people across America under 65 years old who rely on Medicaid. One of the highest is here in California in the 22nd district, where 54% of my Republican colleague David Valadio's constituents under 65 years old, including children, depend on Medicaid. Republican Speaker Mike Johnson, 40% of his district, the leader of the House, 40% of his district in Louisiana relies on Medicaid. And in Pennsylvania, for example, 31% of Republican Ron Bresnahan's constituents are on Medicaid, and the list goes on and on. Unfortunately, Republicans and Speaker Mike Johnson are really rubber stamping what Donald Trump wants. They are giving away the power of the purse, our Article I powers in the Congress, the powers of the purse. Those are essentially being abdicated in many respects to the president. They fear retribution and essentially have abdicated their responsibilities to check the power of the executive. They're worried that he'll come out against them and they'll get a primary challenge with the president as a direct political actor. Trump is trying to strong-arm us into believing he is a king. He is not a king, and we won't stand for it. We are at an inflection point in our nation's history. It is a moment for choosing what kind of America we want. We must choose equity and economic opportunity over tariffs and tax giveaways. Choose unity and peace over chaos and conflict. Deliberation and collaboration over division and dictatorship. We choose freedom and democracy over tyranny and Trumpism. Choose the Constitution and the rule of law over anarchy and monarchy. And yes, we choose ballots and voting rights over suppression and oppression. As a co-chair of the House Democratic Caucus's Task Force on Strengthening Democracy, I'm fighting for our democracy every day I go to Washington. But it is up to all of us to protect our democracy and the future of our country. That's why I'm heartened to see all of you here today. If you're angry, like I am, get organized with like-minded individuals who are working on issues you care about. We need a mass mobilization, and we saw that with the rallies over the weekend, and I was pleased to be at the Palo Alto one and was blown away by the number of constituents who have come out to speak out about the No Kings effort. If you have friends or family in Republican districts, ask them to call their representatives. We all listen to the calls that we get and the emails we get. Don't think for a second it doesn't matter, because we are accountable to our constituents. If you have friends in those districts, call those purple districts, those swing seats in particular. It absolutely matters. Speak out, have your voice heard in those Republican districts. Tell them to listen to their constituents and not an autocratic president and unelected billionaire advisors. I'm doing everything I can in my power to fight against Trump's overreach and try to protect the values that we as Americans hold dear. But I'm also laser focused on flipping the House into Democratic control so we can be a check on that executive power. As I mentioned, Trump's devastating budget cuts passed the House by only one vote. Elections absolutely matter, and I encourage everyone who cares deeply to join me in mobilizing. Also, I can't lose sight of other important legislative efforts that I am leading. The Poverty Line Act to modernize the way we measure poverty in America, to better account for kitchen table costs in 2025, housing costs, childcare costs, healthcare costs, utility costs. We need to modernize the way we gauge poverty, which would affect a whole range of federal programs helping those who need it. The Earthquake Resilience Act, I'm calling for the first time national risk assessment. We're all too familiar with earthquakes in this part of the country, but earthquakes happen all over the country. Millions of dollars is lost every year. This will make sure that agencies led by FEMA, which should not for a second be devolved to the states. FEMA needs to be a national entity that deals with disasters. And when these disasters hit these red states, I think you're going to hear from those Republicans in those red states. They need FEMA. And that is where the federal government needs to step up, has the capacity to step up and help those in need. I've also introduced the empty lots to housing so we can convert underutilized lots, unused parking lots for housing near transportation centers, breaking down some of the barriers we see at the federal level, allowing the local land use process to work, but at least removing some federal barriers there. And making sure that we become more resilient as a community. Energy and Commerce Committee is dealing with climate resilience. And I have to tell you, there are moments when I feel like I have to strip the word climate out of my bill descriptions when I'm trying to get Republican co-sponsors. There is a real divide there. Climate change is real. My Republican colleagues know it, but they're worried about the politics around this. We need to move this issue beyond partisan combat. And constituent services, of course, and I'm surrounded by my incredible staff here in the San Mateo District Office, without whom I could not do the work I'm doing. Thank you for that. They do incredible work day in and day out to serve you. So I will be continuing to hold town halls up and down the peninsula to understand the interests and needs in our community. I very much appreciate everyone being here tonight to let me know what is happening to them and their families and their communities. Let's keep in mind, however, that the folks here are our neighbors, and not everybody agrees with the other's politics. Out of respect for everyone here tonight, I'd ask that you please not interrupt. We will have an orderly process to make sure we get to as many folks as possible. Please respect that process. We'll try to make this as efficient as possible to hear from as many of you as we can. So with that, bless you for coming out. You make democracy work. It's an honor to be with you tonight. And now it's time to hear from you. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to turn it over to Samantha, I believe.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you guys all so much for being here. As Congressman Mullin mentioned, we're going to try to get to as many of you as possible. Just a heads up, we are going to be sticking to federal issues this evening. So I'm going to be calling up 2 people at a time. If you hear your name and your city, do us a favor and raise your hand. And if we can all be polite neighbors and let that person stand up and come into the aisle, and then one of our staff, if you guys can all raise your hands with the microphones, will come to you, and we're looking forward to hearing from you all. So the first person we have tonight is Kim from San Mateo, and she has a question or a comment regarding funding for science and grants. And then after Kim, we're going to go with Kyle. It looks like he's got a question or a comment regarding FEMA from zip code 94403. Okay, great. Looks like Kyle's over there. So let's start with Kim. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I live in San Mateo, and I'm a professor at San Francisco State. I'm one of those people who had their grant cut. It was a science education research grant. I'm in physics and astronomy, and it was cut less than 90 days before the end, and I'm super worried about the National Science Foundation budget coming up, the NASA budget, all of the health stuff as well. What can I do? What can you do? Yeah. Science takes a long time to train students. I'm worried about my students, and it's a big investment, and it's crazy to cut it off.
I agree totally. Can I just say thank you so much for that, and thank you for the work that you do. This has been one of those issues I try, when issues come through, to sort of put myself, if I were a member of the other party, I had a different political philosophy, what would my rationale be for this? I cannot find a rationale that makes any sense to cut scientific funding when treatments for Alzheimer's, we are on the brink of incredible discovery. And now those efforts are being undercut. And it's really, in the grand scheme, pennies on the dollar, the cuts to the NIH. But to the individuals who have the grants, to the folks who are suffering from the diseases, you know, we're in this innovation capital of the world. I have more life sciences companies in my district than anywhere in America. The most unbelievable scientific discovery is happening in our backyard right here. And it is coming up with amazing treatments, therapies, cures. It makes no sense fiscally. It doesn't save money in the long run. I think it's really about DOGE and the effort to show visibly we're cutting government spending when they couldn't really, for political reasons, touch Social Security and Medicare, or even defense, which absolutely should get a close scrutiny. And instead, cut a variety of the other discretionary programs. And we had a so-called rescissions bill come through. I'm fighting back on the cuts to public media, to PBS and NPR. I'm calling those out. There are a number of cuts that do not save money in the long run. In fact, and I know I'm taking this in kind of a different direction. I want to be respectful of the question, but the DOGE effort may wind up costing the government more money because a number of the firings are illegal. Those jobs will be restored. A number of the employees were still receiving pay while their cases were being adjudicated because there were a number of lawsuits out there. And there are going to be all sorts of legal bills that the government has to incur. So this notion is going to save, first of all, it was $2 trillion. Then it was $1 trillion. And then now they're talking about, well, we might save $150 billion. They're not even going to get to that number. And it is unfortunate in one respect because the GAO came out with a report. There are some elements of waste, fraud, and abuse just on the natural. Not as much as you would think. Public money gets scrutinized heavily. There are lots of eyes on public money, more than you would ever suspect. So, good. If there is waste, fraud, and abuse that the GAO identified, those should have gone after that. Instead, it's about generating headlines, and it's been a complete bust and embarrassing and something of a missed opportunity in a way. If you want to actually get under the hood of how the federal government operates, let's revamp our IT and how technology works in the federal government. Utilize some of those skills for good. Instead, it's been a hatchet effort that's been very destructive and disruptive and won't wind up saving us much money at all. But please know, on the NIH funding, I went to the floor to speak about this. This is a big deal to me. And I'm going to keep calling it out until that funding gets restored. So thank you for that.
Okay, and then I know we've got Kyle next. After Kyle, we're going to have Nicholas, who looks like he's got a comment or question regarding childcare. Is Nicholas here? Okay, thanks. If you could come out to the aisle while Kyle speaks. Thank you.
I guess, so my question's around the FEMA funding. So my wife's one of the federal employees that were deployed to the wildfire response in LA, one of many. And they worked tirelessly over 2 months to clean that up, the mess up in record time. And with the cuts to FEMA, we're just curious, what is the plan, what is the action, and what are you willing or pushing to do to combat that at a federal level?
First of all, thank your wife, thank you for the sacrifice you're making in a horrific disaster. Just breathtaking in its scope, and our hearts went out to everybody in Southern California that's affected. This will be a multi-year effort to rebuild. we are doing everything we can to call out what's happening. There's a pattern here of the president, not only when it comes to FEMA funding, but the enforcement actions with ICE, for example, targeting his political opponents. He views things in blue state and red state context. It happened with some of the SALT tax issues, targeting high-cost areas like California and New York. And now he's threatening to withhold FEMA funding because he doesn't like our state's politics. This is not how it is supposed to work, everybody. It is offensive to our own history. If there were another Republican, can you imagine the Bushes, either one of them, trying to politicize funding to those who have been devastated? That would not have happened. Not that I agreed with all of their politics, believe me. I could give you chapter and verse on that. But when it comes to that kind of issue, they would not politicize this like the president is. It's frankly embarrassing. We are going to keep pushing. When push comes to shove and there's tornado relief and hurricane relief, gearing relief to red states, our California delegation will stand strong together. And one of the rays of hope, I have to say, is I believe we are gradually rebuilding some relationships cross-party in the California delegation because we have too many issues with climate and just recovering from disasters. If you give my Republican colleagues truth serum, they would tell you politicizing FEMA assistance is abhorrent. We have to get them to be on the record, though, as the majority party in the House, to publicly call that out and then restore the traditional means by gauging how federal relief gets out there. So we will continue to monitor this, and we're going to fight, and our governor is a champion on this. And he has had to do a bit of a dance here as a leader of an opposition party vocally, nationally, to also trying to work with the Trump administration to make sure we are not shorted. We send way more money to Washington, tax money. We send way more tax dollar than we receive back. We are a donor state. We are a donor region. We're a donor county. And I'm mindful of that every day. We got to make sure we get our resources back in these local areas, especially when there's something that's devastating as the fire. So thank you, sir, for raising that issue, and we'll continue to push for that funding.
Thank you. And then we have Nicholas next, and after Nicholas will be Peter from Burlingame, who has a comment or question about bipartisanship. Is Peter in the audience? Great, thank you, Peter.
Hi, Kevin. I have a question about birth rates, which are declining worldwide in basically every country, particularly in Western industrialized countries. And it's clearly not just a financial issue because some of the countries with the most generous childcare programs, like Sweden and Norway, are also experiencing a decline in birth rates. So given the fact that this is likely a cultural issue, as well as an economic issue, and I'm assuming you agree that it's an issue, how do you think federal policymakers should approach this and address this?
Hey, do you mind if you could just stay there for a second? This has been a quandary for me with no easy answer. You mentioned the cultural thing. I sort of, I think, out of habit, naturally point toward economic concerns. And I just think, I guess, in my own family, when my wife and I'm a very late in life father. And for a while, I wasn't sure we were going to have kids. We pursued IVF, but I'm a late in life dad. But absolutely in our conversations, we were thinking about, do we make enough money? My wife works for the county. I was working for the state. We're public servants. Do we make enough money to stay in this high-cost area and raise a family here? So I'm sharing my thought process. It went to economic, but do you have any ideas on, when you say culturally, I think there's just, as a thinking human being here, there's probably great anxiety about the world that our children are going to inherit. I'll just share my own, I'm deeply concerned. It's why I do this job beyond just my family. other kids and like where we're going as a republic, the kind of country they're going to inherit. I worry every day at the trend line, just at some of the dysfunction I see and the anger and the incivility in our public life. Just what kind of governance will exist in 20 years, in 30 years. So there's anxiety there. Do you have other ideas? Because I am open to any and all ideas on that, and it's a tricky conversation because you're talking about very personal decisions that people make, and it's hard to legislate that, and it's hard to, you can do some public policy around the challenge, but it's difficult to kind of attack that directly. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Not exactly, but I guess I would say one major issue is that most people who are having children are in their 20s and 30s. Those are the people who are in general not participating in democracy. I mean, if you look at this room, most people here are beyond the age of having children, and so that poses.
I'm not going to touch that one, man. I'm not gonna...
But you can see how that poses a real issue. The people who are experiencing this crisis and who are going to experience the kind of downstream impacts, which could be severe, are not even in the conversation right now because they're generally not involved in politics. So I think that's the main problem. We don't even know why people aren't having kids necessarily, but they certainly aren't going to government and talking about it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I want our young people to be fully engaged in our politics. I was the author of the 17-year-old primary vote, where young 17-year-olds could participate in primary elections if they'd be 18 by the general election. That actually got to the voters, and the voters rejected it. I think they thought I was trying to lower the voting age outright to 17. I wasn't. I was just trying to do it for primary elections because you shape the field for the general election in the primary. Anyway, still smarting from that loss. But my thought is just, I spent last night with some of the Peninsula Young Democrats, and bright, thoughtful young people who want to get engaged in politics, that gave me a lift to see that in spite of all the negativity, there are still young people who care enough to participate directly in our politics, and those are the people who will be our future leaders. And we need to be incubating the bench and the next generation of leadership in our county. But it's very hard in this county when the cost of living is what it is. We live in one of the most expensive places in the world, right here. And for all of the wonderful things, and I was thinking about this, I took a little ride around the campus and looking at that skyline view from here. We live in such a beautiful place that I'm so lucky to represent, but it is tough for that next generation to make it work financially, and we have to be mindful of it all the time. Anyway, thank you for the question. Who's next?
Okay, so we've got Peter, and after Peter, we're going to have Carol from Menlo Park, who has a question or comment about elections. Is Carol in the audience? If you could raise your hand. Great, Carol. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for being here and doing this. Really. A lot of people that have your job are not meeting with their constituents, so I personally thank you for that.
Thank you.
I came here with one question that, because of a conversation I had with a fellow audience member, morphed. Yeah. So if I can hybridize it, what I've been discussing with my friends, and at the No Kings rally on Saturday, we were all like, how is this happening? Like, we all went to school, we learned about civics, we learned about checks and balances, we learned about we could never have a king, we could never have a dictator because there are checks and balances. Yeah. So my initial question tonight was, what legal scholars do we need to get on this to find something to stop a madman who's taking over our country? Now, I was discussing with my friends that I came with, and my fellow audience member turned around and started what is actually, I think, more to the point. On the other side of the aisle from you, from me, are a bunch of people who, if you get them, used the term truth serum earlier. if you gave them some truth serum, I don't think that a lot of them would think what's happening is a good thing. And in light of what happened in Minnesota, is the level of fear truly that high on the other side of the aisle that these people are unwilling to take action? Are you aware of any sort of caucus in the Republican committee with your colleagues across the aisle who are working together behind the scenes about to do something?
Yeah.
Long
Thank
question.
you. This has caused me some sleepless nights because there is no easy answer here to address the issue of job security. If my Republican colleagues, I think some of them are, and this is guesswork, since we're on YouTube and this is being seen by folks across the country, not just here in the room. It's guesswork, but my sense is there are a number of folks, the Freedom Caucus, for example, who are very, very right-wing, just ideologically extremely conservative, just on the natural. You have kind of a MAGA movement within the Republican caucus. And I mean, it's sort of been suggested, it's a lot easier to go along, go with the flow, than to stand up and call out Trump. If you stand up on the Republican side and call him out, like I have no fear calling him out, but it's a totally different dynamic for them internally. He will call him out on Twitter. There are examples of threats on individuals because they've called out Donald Trump. There is a threatening political environment, and you mentioned Minnesota. Our hearts are heavy with that. There's absolutely no place for political violence across the spectrum. There's no place for that in America. And we were on a security briefing just today looking at our own security protocol. There's no place for it. But back to the Republican caucus, and I think there are a number of folks that if you did get the truth out of them, they probably want Donald Trump gone. Because he creates such, he is such a heavyweight politically that it's like suffocating. He limits their ability to work across the aisle. They're concerned, like there's a lot of cross-party stuff that happens completely out of sight, just on the natural. But on the big stuff, it is really hard to get bipartisan cooperation. And so that channel is essentially has been corroded. And I have to look for just some rays of hope. I've got a very conservative Republican colleague who I serve with in the legislature, but I have a relationship with him. He's a great guy, smart guy, believer in science, despite being very conservative and representing a conservative district. I'm going to be hosting him probably in November in my district so he can see all the innovation that's happening here. And then I'm going to return the favor, or he's going to return the favor, and I'm going to go visit his Big Bear district to get a sense of red California. And we have to do some of those baby steps. And quite literally, they are baby steps, right? We're not talking about cooperating on a huge bill. But you've identified something which we have to tackle. At some point, Donald Trump will be gone. He won't run for a third term. If he does, it is blatantly unconstitutional. There will be a post-Trump America where we will have to rebuild a politics of the common good. We are going to have to rebuild faith in institutions across this country. There's going to be repair work for a generation because of the damage that's being done right now. And when they are free from those shackles, they will probably give us the truth about what that impact is. But I tell you what, I'm not giving them a pass at all. Mike Johnson, our Republican speaker, needs to stand up to him. We are Article 1 in the Constitution, power of the purse. He is abdicating his responsibility. And they're the majority party. They're saying he's our guy. I don't want to cross him. They gave him the tariff power. They're just basically doing what he wants to do. When there are some holdouts on big bills. Donald Trump gets on the phone, bangs on them, they flip, they fold. He's that powerful on their side, but I don't give him a pass. Our speaker needs to be standing up, not just for that Republican caucus, he needs to be standing up for the Congress. And he's not. And he's failing. He's failing. He's a very nice man on an interpersonal level, but if he were standing in front of me, I would tell him the same damn thing. He's failing the House of Representatives. He's failing the Constitution by what he's doing. I appreciate the question and no great answer for it.
Okay, I know we have Carol next, and after Carol, we're going to have Michael from San Mateo, who has a question about immigration reform. Is Michael here? Okay, thanks, Michael.
Hello. Oop. Okay. Donald Trump and his sycophants will most likely try to interfere with the midterm election. What are your and the Democrats' plan to ensure that we have fair and accurate elections? Our democracy depends on it.
Yep, thank you. I absolutely will do everything in my power as the co-chair on the task force on strengthening democracy to make sure that we have free and fair elections in 2026. As some of you know who have followed my career, we have done great work when I was in the legislature on voting access. We pioneered the all vote by mail ballot right here in San Mateo County. We pioneered that. We showed that every voter automatically getting a ballot, postage paid, turnout went up. We proved that model right here in this county, and it spread to 5 other counties, and then it spread statewide, and then because of the pandemic, it really became a national phenomenon, the vote by mail phenomenon, but we pioneered that here. I have great faith in local, nonpartisan elections officials. All these notions about stolen elections and you still have an election denier in Donald Trump who, because he lost the election, says it was faulty. It wasn't a problem, I guess, when he won the election, right? Suddenly all those problems went away, I guess. I put pressure on our previous Attorney General to put attention on a task force within the Department of Justice looking at the threats on local elections workers. My fear is there's a culture, especially in the climate we're in with political violence and so forth, where local elections officials are still living with some sense of fear. And you've got eyes, and you've got conspiracy theories, and it is a toxic climate in many places in this country. Now, I've spoken out pretty vociferously about voting suppression tactics in red states. That is a real thing in this country, trying to strip folks from the voting rolls, erecting barriers, limiting the time that you can send a ballot in. So the issue, and I have looked at this stuff very, very closely, the issue is public policy that gets dressed up as election integrity. In reality, it's erecting barriers to participation. And that's what this is. This is about, over time, a fear by many on the right that when the people are fully empowered to speak and have their vote heard, that the Republicans will lose. Now, it's debatable whether or not the data actually bears that out. Okay, Donald Trump put together a coalition of voters that we Democrats traditionally think we appeal to. They won the popular vote. I do not believe, and some folks may not like this, there are some folks that think the last election was stolen. It wasn't. We lost an election. We lost an election. And it hurts, and we're still paying the price for it at the national level. The way that unfolded with Biden dropping out and so forth. We lost an election. Now, we actually picked up seats in the House. I'm proud of my colleagues who picked up seats. And we are going to flip the House in 2026. I am confident about that. But I'm going to make it my goal as the co-chair of this task force to be a laser on protecting the local elections officials who are public servants, who don't have an axe to grind, who are just counting the votes. They're counting the votes, and they're doing the best they can under very difficult circumstances. And we have one of the best here in our county that we should be proud of. And I will continue to focus efforts on the threat environment to our elections officials. And we're going to call out gerrymandering and all of the tactics used by the right to suppress the votes in this country. And I'm going to speak out as loud as I possibly can, even with a voice that's crackling because of laryngitis. I will speak as loud as I can, especially when we take back the House. We're going to be part of an effort to run a set of reforms that we've championed here in California. I want to bring that to the national level, and you have my commitment to do that.
Okay, thanks. After, I think it was Michael, correct? We've got, and forgive me if I mispronounce your name, I think it's CPay, who has a question about the federal debt from Belmont. Great, thank you.
Last month, my wife and I took my mom for her first time and our second time to see the Statue of Liberty in Ellis Island. And it was so disheartening to see how far we've fallen from the ideals that are expressed there. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I understand that in last year's Biden's term that we passed, or we're about to pass, a bipartisan immigration bill that would hopefully clarify this and make it simpler for immigrants, because we as a country need them. Speaking of the birth rate, speaking of agriculture, service industries, we need immigrants. And so now, since the R's control all the houses, is now the perfect time to get back to that bill and clarify it so that it's on the record for how can we make immigration clean and efficient for the people who could want to go through the steps and do it legally.
Yeah. Thank you. And there is history here. There was bipartisan work in the Senate. It was a real reform bill. It wasn't nibbling around the edges. It was a path to essentially earn citizenship, protection for the dreamers, money for asylum judges, a real reform package. We were calling out for comprehensive immigration reform. And this has been one of the more frustrating things. It calls out for bipartisanship because the business community needs immigrant labor. Farmers, red states need immigrant labor. Factories, construction workers. So this is about headline generation from the president. He went out and said, now I wasn't in the room, but you can look at the results. He said, don't move that bill. We're going to kill that thing. Kill that thing. Don't give Joe Biden a win on immigration reform. He killed that bill when it came our way in the House. We didn't have a chance to move that package. That is one of those election year things where the president, where he says, where candidate Trump said to his congressman, do not pass this bill. I need this issue to hammer Joe Biden on. Now, Joe Biden should have moved, I think, more quickly on executive orders on immigration reform to just politically show he was engaged. There were some missed opportunities there. But you're now seeing the president, I can't tell who's in charge, Donald Trump or Stephen Miller. I think it sort of depends on the day. I think today it's probably Stephen Miller. But they are now more or less in retreat because I know Donald Trump heard from some of his big corporate donors and said, you're killing my factory, man, with these ICE raids. You're killing my farm process. That is a real thing. There needs to be a recognition of the role that immigrants play in this country and our economy. Yes, we need a border. We have to have security. We have to have a coherent process. But when you see a mother in the school pickup line to pick up her 2 kids and gets ripped out of the car and brought to the ground by plainclothes ICE agents, that's a disgrace. That's a disgrace. And we need a humane policy that doesn't rip families apart. It's not who we are. It's not who we are as a country. It's not the country that I grew up in. We're better than this, what we're seeing. We're better than a U.S. senator being tackled to the ground because he wants to ask a question of the Director of Homeland Security. We're better than that. So we will work day and night. The glimmer of hope, if the Democrats take the House, damn it, let's work in a bipartisan way, for God's sake. And I don't care if it's a win for Donald Trump. We need to do something about this process. And it's an abject failure of our political system that we don't have that. I'm going to remain hopeful that a brighter day is ahead when we can actually get a deal on that. Because calling out for a deal, the way this is happening and unfolding in our communities is a disgrace. And I'm embarrassed by it. We have to be better. We have to be better than that. Thank you for the question.
Okay, after CPay, we're going to have Mary from San Bruno, who's got a question about the One Big Beautiful Bill. So is Mary here? Thank you. And apologies if I mispronounced your name, sir.
Hi, Congressman. Thank you for coming here tonight. My question is about the national debt.
Yeah.
And this is something that, as you mentioned in your prepared talks, is very concerning should be for all Americans. And it really comes down to the spending versus the income as a country. Yeah. And when I look at the numbers, 1.4, 1.5 trillion, it really eclipses anything that you could easily take out and strip out. And I think DOJ discovered this as they were trying to cut down the national budget as well. So I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on this? You understand it's a problem, but how do we really start to practically pay down, reduce the budget deficits and start to pay down that debt? Because I haven't seen any proposals from Democrats or Republicans that really make sense to me.
Yeah. Well, some of my corporate constituents would probably not be thrilled with me to say this, but I think we should be returning the corporate tax rate to 35%. And I think we ought to be closing some of the outrageous loopholes that exist in our Irish tax code. I think we should make sure we have a progressive income tax structure like we do in California. But I would also, at the same time, want to make sure we're looking at the burdens on the middle class in this country. If it were up to me and I were king for a day, don't worry, I'm not. I would give the middle class a tax break because it is, for lots of folks, there's no money at the end of the month. There is no money at the end of the month for so many people in this country who are struggling day in and day out. I would look at that tax code, figure out a way that billionaires pay their fair share, that corporations pay their fair share, and the middle class gets a break. Now, I would also, however, make sure that we're properly scrutinizing federal spending. There have been efforts led, I'm old enough to remember Al Gore's Reinventing Government effort, which did make some changes, not enough, because we live in, unfortunately, an incremental progress world, but attention was given to where inefficiencies occur. We need a much more efficient government. I've had people talk to me about, what's interesting, if you're under 65, your impression of the federal government is often like your local post office or the TSA as you go through security. If you're over 65, obviously entitlements play a huge role in sustaining people, and those are not up for discussion. However, let me just say on entitlements, as you got me going on the budget here, we need to stabilize the finances of Social Security. I would raise the so-called FICA cap to bring more money in the system to ensure its sustainability over time. It would just inject a little bit of progressivity in our entitlement tax structure, and it would buy us decades because of the size of the program. If you make relatively modest changes, you can stabilize the finances of Social Security and Medicare, which so many people rely on. But what burns me is 16% of our spending goes to financing the debt. We had a balanced budget in 1993, and Democrats lost their job in Congress because they voted for it. But there was a time in this country when there was fiscal sanity, and we need to return to that. But there's a way to do it in a way that's an expression of our values, but also doesn't saddle future generations with unsustainable debt and burden. There's a way to do this. And anything big like that would have to be bipartisan, would have to be. And there were some big grand bargains and big plans that got thwarted at the last minute because of politics over the last 20 years. We, out of necessity, need to have a sane conversation about the fiscal structure in this country, because budgets, tax systems are expressions of your values as a people. And we are missing the mark to a great degree right now. So I appreciate that question. I hope I gave you a little sense of what I would do.
Okay, next we have Mary, and after Mary, we're going to have Dow Jane, who has a question or comment about education from Belmont. Okay, great.
First to clarify, I wrote OBBB. I did not call it the beautiful bill. I'm not about to call it that. Just saying.
You know what, I'm not to interrupt you. I'm having trouble hearing.
Okay.
I wear hearing aids anyway. I appreciate people projecting into the mics, but if you don't mind, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I'm asking about are the specific nitty-gritty type of actions that can be done when we are calling, I mean, I call you a lot, but when we're telling our friends in Republican districts about what can be done,
Yeah.
because of the whole fear of Donald Trump, the retaliation,
Yeah.
things like just not being there to vote that day. So you have the closer to the even thing. Things like the reconciliation process and calling for, no, we have to read out the entire bill, and we have to read out, what are specific actions like that? Because we don't know these things unless we go into a deep dive.
Yeah. So just right off the bat, very straightforward. This bill is essentially a policy choice of cuts to Medicaid. And by the way, half of all births, I believe in California, half of all births are Medicaid births. This is a huge program that people rely on. There's a very specific policy choice here. They're trying to pay for their tax cuts by cutting Medicaid. Now, that 27-hour markup, the entire push from our side, and we were holding up pictures of individuals who will be harmed, telling real stories. And I believe it resonated. We did get media coverage on that, but then I was a little disheartened. Somebody said, only 14% of the people have heard about the Medicaid cuts in the bill. Well, then we've got to do a better job to let people know that this is a policy choice to give tax cuts to millionaires and billionaires, and cut Medicaid funding. And it's dressed up in work requirements, which is all that's going to do, by the way, is just create more paperwork. These are the guys that want to get rid of all the federal paperwork and the bureaucracy. We're going to be adding paperwork for people who are already working to receive their Medicaid. So I would say, in a very simple message, let them know that, you can look up how the percentage of Medicaid recipients in their district or their state, if you want to call the Senate, because the action right now is in the Senate, and let them know that they're voting against their constituents. And they're not even paying for the tax cut. They don't even have the sort of intellectual honesty to say, well, we're making these really painful cuts to these people who need it, but we're paying for the tax cut. It's not paying for the tax cut. That's why we're adding to the debt. It's fiscal mismanagement. It's completely irresponsible. It's generational theft. Now, on top of it, in the Senate, there was a parliamentary ruling, and this got my goat because I was a Speaker Pro Tem of the California State Assembly, and I worked with our parliamentarian, our chief clerk, and we made sure the way we were proceeding could hold up in a court of law if it was ever challenged. The parliamentarian ruled that this bill should not be subject to the reconciliation process because there are too many non-fiscal issues that are part of it. Normally, if this were like the world that we grew up in, there'd be respect for the parliamentarian's ruling. John Thune, the Republican leader of the Senate, says, nah, I don't care about that. I'm not gonna listen to that. Not in those words exactly, but he's ignoring the ruling of the parliamentarian. So now they are bringing this budget bill. It will come back to our House. We're gonna fight like hell to mitigate the worst parts of it. We're gonna stay unified. When we stay unified, it makes it very difficult for them to pass their bills as originally designed because they then have holdouts and it becomes a legislative negotiation. So again, don't think for a second your calls don't matter. If you have folks in those Republican states or Republican districts, they are gonna listen to their constituents. If they don't, it's to their peril because we're gonna remind everybody in November of 2026 they voted against their constituents and they'll pay a political price for it.
Okay, next we have Dow Jane from Belmont. And after her, we'll have Ramiro from San Mateo who has a question about ICE. Is Ramiro here? Okay, great, thank you.
Good evening. So I'm Dow Jane. I was actually, I am one of the 20,000 employees of HHS that was impacted by the reduction in force on April 1st. I worked in the Office of Head Start in Region 9 in San Francisco. And my question is, I know my situation, while really tough for our family, will be adjudicated in the courts. And so I'm patient in hopefully the court system will prevail. But my worry and question is really about the Head Start program that I worked for. I worked for 15 years in the office and would have gladly worked for 15 more, or however many would allow. The question is, half of the Office of Head Start staff was reduced on April 1st. And so half of my colleagues remain. But there's just as much work as there was before April 1st. And it feels like, Head Start is in the budget and it lives another day, I like to say. But it's flat funded and it's, 50% of the staff are no longer here, are no longer working on the program. So I'm wondering what your office is doing to help preserve and save Head Start, not just for fiscal year 2026, but into the future. I mean, will Head Start be able to survive all 4 years of this presidency?
Well, if we take back the House, Head Start will absolutely be a priority. We have something called the Dad's Caucus because child care issues, early childhood development, where for every dollar you invest, I believe the figure is you save 7 over the long haul. If you invest in early childhood education, you save it in incarceration costs and other social costs. There is no better public dollar spend than investing in early childhood education. In fact, during the pandemic, we had the expanded child care tax credit. It was the most successful anti-child poverty program in our nation's history. Think about that. The number of children that took out of poverty, but then it sunsetted. We fought for it, it went away. That's politics when you lose elections. When we win, we're going to fight for continued funding. But just think about what's happening here. Now, I don't know what will ultimately happen with the half of the employees, or roughly, that were laid off, if those will be restored once the court decisions come down. And make no mistake, Donald Trump is losing in court. If you look at the number of cases that he has lost versus the administration has 1. We are beating back a number of these. But just think about what's happening here. You're putting more burdens on half that workforce. You're getting, with all due respect to every incredible stuff you're doing, the strain and stress on the remaining employees and the impacts on the constituents who are using the service, that's not really going to save much money anyway. It's asinine. Okay, I think you all know this. If you're here and you're a thinking human being, it makes no sense fiscally or otherwise. But just please know our caucus, both the Women's Caucus and the Dad's Caucus, is going to stand with families and investing in childcare. And affordable, quality childcare is the basis for success. And I can speak to this directly as the father of 7-year-old boys. The truth is, though, enormously expensive. We were able to pay for it. Thank God. But there are so many that can't, or single parents trying to afford infant care, for example. Infant care is enormously expensive. If you want labor force participation, you want women and parents back in the workforce, we've got to do so much more than we are doing right now. So I would say to you, sure, we will fight to maintain the funding, but we need to do a whole hell of a lot more than that to properly fund that baseline for working families. So thank you for letting me get on my soapbox on that one, because there is no more important tax dollars spent than on early childhood ed. So I'm with you.
So we have Ramiro, and then after Ramiro, we have Jack from Burlingame, who has a question or comment about the No Kings protest. Is Jack here? Great, thanks.
Congressman Mullin, thank you for answering our questions and for addressing our concerns tonight. As a second-generation United States-born citizen and Hispanic, I'm extremely concerned about the tactics and actions that this current administration and ICE is taking on our citizens and innocent immigrants.
Yeah.
What is the Democratic Party actively doing or thinking of doing to stop this blatant abuse of power?
Well, we are shining a light on the abuses right now. Right now, when we do not have the gavels where we can do oversight hearings, if we had the gavels, we would subpoena, we would do oversight hearings, we would shine a light directly with the national media on the abuses in the system that are painful to see, painful to watch. And think about the fear that so many are living in this country, that that ICE van is going to arrive and their family is going to be torn apart. We have 3.5 years of this Trump presidency. We have another 1.5 years till the election in 2026. We have a responsibility to call out the abuses and make it extremely painful for our Republican colleagues to look the other way, because a political price is to be paid. Now, that's insufficient for somebody who today is living in fear. There's what's happening too is you have Democratic officials being targeted, okay? Being targeted for calling these things out. And I don't believe for a second that Kristi Noem didn't know who Alex Padilla was when she was holding a press conference in Southern California. I don't believe it. I don't believe that for a second. I don't believe it for a second. So we are in a battle for the future of this country. We're in a battle for the kind of republic that we're going to have for ourselves. There is absolutely a need for a sane immigration policy that does not separate families, but ensures that a proper process unfolds, and that there's a pathway to earn citizenship, and that the resources go there. but it's incredibly frustrating to me that our recourse at the moment is going and calling out questions at a press conference or using our bodies as shields to protect immigrants for the fear of being detained or arrested ourselves. That, of course, hasn't happened to me, but I'm seeing this unfold, and we have to continue to shine a light on the abuses and move public opinion in our direction. I can't emphasize enough, without public opinion on your side, you're really nowhere. And the concern I have is we have such a diffuse media environment. A story will spark for a few days that 10 years ago, 20 years ago would dominate the headlines for weeks. Now it's just the media news cycle turns so quickly. It's hard to focus public attention on any particular issue. This is a real challenge when you've got leaders who are acting from an authoritarian playbook, who undermine traditional media, undermine all institutions that actually could hold them accountable. You need public opinion. You need the public to rise up. That's why I was encouraged by the No King, speaking of the next question. The public is being activated and motivated and mobilizing, and it can force the president to back off the extremism. We are fighting the extremism. We are fighting the extremism in the court of public opinion, in the real courts, in federal court, and our governor is going through that process here with the National Guard being dispatched over his objections. Not done since 1965, a total violation of our existing protocols. We're fighting it in the courts. We're fighting it in the court of public opinion. And we're going to be fighting this in the Congress and giving voice, and we're going to be fighting it in our communities until we take power back.
Thank you. Next we have Jack from Burlingame. And after Jack, we're going to have Jessica from San Mateo. Is Jessica from San Mateo here? Maybe Jessica has gone home. Okay. After Jack, we will have Victoria from San Mateo. Victoria? Okay, thanks.
Great. Thank you for being here tonight, Congressman Mullin. Appreciate it. And your previous comments sort of segue right into my question, and that is, a lot of us were out last weekend at the All Kings rallies, and obviously it's something we can do, and many of us would do it again. But I'm just curious, in terms of sort of the communications you have among colleagues and the network you're involved in, is it having any real impact at this point? Are you getting any information that, in fact, maybe some Republican legislators are getting a little softer on things because of the rallies and the public opinion that hopefully was generated?
Yes. Yes. Yes, we are. And you don't have to look any further than President Trump's approval ratings. The No Kings protest, even though it was not affiliated with a political party, nonpartisan citizen action, and I absolutely respect that. But people are saying enough. They've seen enough, they've heard enough. They're speaking out, and they're doing it peacefully. We are not giving Donald Trump or Stephen Miller any reason to go about the process of declaring martial law in this country. And don't think for a second they wouldn't if they had an excuse. It's peaceful protest, it's effective. When done right, that 3 million will become 5 million and become 10 million. And that's going to be registered voters. That is going to be direct political action. That is going to be precinct walking and direct political action when the time is right. Winning in the court of public opinion at this point, and then winning elections when it counts. Got to be a little careful here not to do any direct campaigning. This is an official event, and I'm well aware of that, but we're in a political environment. And I just, I'm a progressive. Democrat. I have one of the most progressive voting records in Sacramento, if you actually look it up. But I'm also a small business owner. I think our political system in many ways is broken. The only way forward is to reform our democracy, to build bridges, to rebuild the politics of the common good. We are, I think, on the precipice of major change in this country. You can feel it. This administration is triggering a reaction that is organic and authentic. And people are saying, this is not the country I want to live in. And this is not the country I want to leave to my kids. And I'll be honest, what's been hard for me, I like to think of myself as a bridge builder. And I think there's a role for bipartisanship with reasonable Republicans. The problem is it's getting harder and harder to find because there's a MAGA movement that has taken hold of that party. And that party will sink or swim with Donald Trump. And they may be riding high at the moment, but I don't like their long-term trajectory as a party. But we, our Democratic Party, has to rebuild ourselves from within. We have to renew our party to be truly a voice for working people in this country, to speak to the income inequality that is pervasive in this country. The CEO pay versus service worker pay is untenable. It's unacceptable in a country as wealthy as ours. I would love nothing more than there to be some common sense Republicans that I could program with who are sick of what they're seeing on their side. It's hard to find right now. But we have to believe it is possible in this country to rebuild post-Trump. We're going to fight him until there's a post-Trump, but post-Trump, we're going to have all of us a challenge on our hand to rebuild belief and faith in the government, in the media, in higher education, which is under attack by this administration, shamefully under attack. Institutions of higher learning, academic freedoms, it's all on the table. Democracy's under assault. It's an authoritarian attack. Call it out. That's what it is. We are going to fight it like hell, and then we're going to have to rebuild this country and the belief in the institutions. We have huge work on our hands, everybody, post-Trump. And I want you to join me in that effort, because it's not enough to have Democratic politicians do it. We all have a huge job in front of us. And nights like tonight are a good start that you're actually here, and I appreciate it.
Okay, I believe we have Victoria next, and after Victoria, we have E from Burlingame, who has a question about Medicaid and healthcare programs.
I think you may already have more or less answered my question, but it is, in the atmosphere that we perceive in social media and in the news, the gotcha moments, I'm talking about in the chamber when you're doing your work, there seems to be just an overwhelming amount of disrespect and grandstanding. So my question is that real? What is it like for you during the day when you're sitting there amongst your colleagues? Is it possible to really get anything done or have a real conversation as a group?
Can you just ask the last part of that question again? I missed just the very end.
Is it possible for you to have conversation in that setting with your colleagues?
With my Republican colleagues?
With all of them, but particularly your Republican colleagues, yeah.
Absolutely, it is. There was a Republican who came over to our side of the chamber, and this chamber, unlike Sacramento, in Sacramento, the Republicans and the Democrats were interspersed. there wasn't a party divide. Maybe it's because there was only like a handful of them. So it had to be spread in amongst them. Which was an oddity when I got to Washington. I'm like, wait, we really all just kind of stand over here? And we don't have desks. There are chairs. Unlike in Sacramento, we have individual desks with voting buttons, and normally I'd be at the rostrum presiding in the assembly. We have our side of the chamber and their side of the chamber, and it's pretty evenly divided, right? It's a 50-50 country in many respects. And most of my conversations are with Democrats, naturally, because that's where I am. But I will many times go over to the Republican side of the aisle, and I'll talk to Jay Obernolte and Vince Fong and some of the guys I used to serve with in the assembly. And I have to say, I had some great relationships with Republican leaders in the assembly. We didn't agree on policy, but we had a respect for each other. And Heath Flora was one of the floor leaders, and a great guy, and we got along. And because we knew each other, we built a relationship. Then there are moments where a Republican came over to our side, and there was a yelling match between one of our members and him. And I don't even know what started it, but we can't have a country where you can't visit the other party on that side of the chamber. Like, we have to be having conversations. And I do, and there is bipartisan conversation and cooperation. It's just often on things that are easy to do. The things that are hard to do and controversial too often get tossed in a partisan bucket. So like artificial intelligence, for example, that's now, AI is going to transform government, transform business, transform education. We have to be just grappling with what kind of regulations and guardrails can the federal government come up with that's flexible enough to evolve as the technology evolves. That should not be used as a wedge between the parties. We've got to work together to figure out what's coherent public policy to allow this technology to thrive, much of it in the Bay Area, but also protects consumers and protects the workforce and protects our democracy. That shouldn't be partisan. That's public policy. Unfortunately, it's starting to trend toward being a dividing line. And there are too many issues that fall into that bucket. And climate, unfortunately, gets tossed. You know, there's this whole issue, and I know I'm going down a rabbit hole, but there was bipartisan support for preserving clean energy tax credits in Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. Republican and Democratic support for clean energy tax credits because there were projects happening in Republican districts and Democratic districts. But there was real support there by Republicans. But it got embedded in the big bill, and when push came to shove, the Republicans voted for it when it was stripping away many of the wins in the Inflation Reduction Act. So that got tossed back into the partisan bucket when it absolutely should not have been. We need to be building a clean energy economy. It affects Republican states, Democratic states. We need to be making the transition. This administration wants to literally go backwards when it comes to fossil fuels and giveaways to oil and gas. And the most blatant pay-to-play scheme ever that I am aware of, where the president essentially promised at a $1 million event that he was going to gut the Inflation Reduction Act and drill, baby, drill, essentially. It is a backwards-looking thing. And honestly, the administration is missing, they've missed an opportunity to really be leaders on innovation and science. They had Elon Musk at their table, who's a brilliant business guy, but doesn't know anything about how government works, and is a complete failure. You know, the rockets and SpaceX notwithstanding, he's probably a brilliant guy when it comes to that stuff, but they blew an opportunity to be an administration of innovation. They're abdicating that, so we're going to keep leading on that, and we're going to keep pushing, and when we have control of the House, we're going to work to restore those clean energy tax credits because we absolutely need to make a coherent transition to a clean energy economy that doesn't leave workers behind. I'm an all of the above energy guy. It's going to take all that to power the AI computers, the needs that AI has. We have huge burdens on our energy sector, but this administration has taken us back, and we've got to lead. And California's got to keep our leadership position on those issues, and we are fighting against an administration that wants to attack California and go backwards. That is a pitched battle right now in the Congress.
Okay, I believe we have Eve from Burlingame.
Hello, thank you for this meeting. I'm a mother of a developmentally disabled adult child who relies on Medicaid services for many of her activities of daily life. She lives in a group home, and she has day services that gives her all the activities she does during the week. And I am, of course, very concerned about Medicaid cuts. And my question really is there any remote possibility that the Medicaid cuts won't be as large? I understand there will be some. There's no way of getting around it.
Yeah.
But is there any chance it won't be as large?
Yes, yes, because the arguments are resonating. What started out as an $800 billion cut is getting pared back. And the Senate, I think, is going to make that number smaller still. Donald Trump, even early on in the process, said, we're not going to touch Medicaid. Say what you want about him. He understands politics. He understands we're going to put these guys in a position to vote against their own constituents, and it's probably going to cost them the job and cost them the House. It is working. Despite the 14% figure I mentioned, I share that because I live sometimes in a little bit of a bubble back there. Like, we are pounding away so hard on this. It's absolutely making a difference. It's making a difference, but not enough of one. So you have to pound away on a message for it to get through the media cacophony. But the tide is turning on that issue. And I think we have a chance to mitigate the cuts and preserve some of the basics on the funding, but only if we keep up the fight. Only if we continue to make that 14%, 18%, and 20% and 25%, and make it really painful for those Republicans in swing states and swing districts. This is basic politics, but we've got to make sure they understand a political price will be paid. Thank you for sharing your story. If you wouldn't mind, would love to get your info. The more stories that I have that I can be armed with, the better. It comes down to people and storytelling and making the case in the court of public opinion and from the committee dais. So I would welcome a follow-up if you'd be willing to talk about what the cuts would mean to your family, so I could share that to my colleagues. I'd welcome that.
What cuts exactly are they doing to her family?
What's that?
We couldn't hear. What cuts exactly are they doing to her family? There are no cuts to disabled people and the elderly.
Do you want to get? I can't hear you.
Yeah, I think she's just, thank you. I think she's just asking what specific cuts is Medicaid, or are they making to Medicaid that could harm families like the woman who just spoke out with her story?
Yeah, so these are, there are families that are very dependent on Medicaid funding, and the current cut is going to mean devastation for people who need these services. We're talking about $700 billion with the. We're not gonna yell out if you have a card. Is there a card? Did you submit a card, ma'am?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
It was on this line.
Okay. We're gonna try to stick to the process if we can, but we can get you specific information. We can get you specific information about. We can get you specific information about the cuts to Medicaid. Do we have another one?
No, I think I appreciate. You know what? We've all had a very nice conversation so far, and I know Congressman Mullin does have some final points that he wanted to share. So if you want to go ahead and like I said, we're here to talk to folks afterward. So this isn't going to be the last opportunity to speak to people. I will be sticking around as well. So please feel free to come speak to me after. But I do want to make sure that Congressman Mullin has a chance to finish what he wanted to share with you all. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Samantha, and thank you all for being here. Even if you disagree with me, I thank you for being here. And to that last point, I do believe the tide is beginning to turn on the Trump administration and the extremism on display. Opposition efforts are resonating, and they are changing public opinion one step at a time. It is happening. But I also, please know, I am mindful that in spite of my political philosophy, I represent and serve all of my constituents, all 762 plus thousand of them, not only those who agree with me. And I appreciate it. And this is small d democratic action unfolding here tonight. I'm grateful. Please stay engaged. Sign up for our newsletter if you haven't. Follow me on my official social media accounts. I have a personal social media account, and people get upset. They think that's the only account I have, and why am I posting just cute pictures of my dog and my kids? I have an official social media profile where you can hear about all of my official activities. I am looking forward to holding more town halls. Just please know it's the honor of my life to represent you, even in these incredibly challenging times for all of us. It is an honor. I'm grateful. Thank you for being here tonight, and enjoy the rest of your